Meeting Thursday, June 20th, 2019. Item A is roll call. We now are in open session. President Lee,
Here.
Commissioner Middleton,
Here.
Commissioner Moreno-Linares,
Here.
Commissioner Perosi, Commissioner Special Board Meeting Thursday, June 20th, 2019. Item A is roll call. We now are in open session. President Lee,
Here.
Commissioner Middleton,
Here.
Commissioner Moreno-Linares,
Here.
Commissioner Perosi, Commissioner Renwick.
Here.
We have secured a quorum.
We will now go into closed session to discuss the items listed on the posted agenda. Thank you.
President Lee, if you're ready? Yes, we are ready, thank you. We're rolling. Good. We are now back in open session.
The board took no reportable action at the closed session and will now go to the open session.
Thank you. We are now on category 6 of the special meeting agenda for the executive director remarks with Jean Soroka.
President, commissioners, members of the public, distinguished guests, and Harbor Department staff. I'll begin my comments this morning with Cirque du Soleil Amaluna. In April, Cirque du Soleil returned to the Port of Los Angeles along our historic waterfront with its new show, Amaluna. Cirque was last here in the year 2013 with their show Totem. Their decision to return has proven to be advantageous as the show attracted more than 92,000 guests during its nearly 6-week run. Cirque averaged 1,967 guests per show, which is great as the organizer considers 2,000 guests a sellout. I'd like to thank our waterfront and commercial real estate division, in particular, Megan Sestich, for working with the vendor and other key stakeholders to make this event the great success that it was. Thank you, Megan. May cargo volume. The Port of Los Angeles moved more than 828,000 TEUs in the month of May, making it our busiest May in our 112-year history. Previously, the strongest May was in year 2017 at a little more than 796,000 TEUs. The volume in this May represents a growth of 7.8% versus last year in 2018. And for the first 5 months of calendar year 2019, port volume has increased by 5.2% compared to the same period last year. I'm extremely pleased with another record month of throughput and grateful to our supply chain stakeholders, terminal operators, and unparalleled longshore labor workforce for their performance. As we prepare for our traditional peak shipping season in the months ahead, we're closely monitoring the global trade tensions that have created a heightened level of unpredictability. In May of 2019, imports increased by 5.5% to more than 427,000 TEUs, and exports declined for the 7th consecutive month, down just slightly in the month to 167,000 TEUs. And once again, the largest growth segment was empty containers being repositioned to Asia at more than 20% growth and 230,000 TEUs. Meetings and conferences. Since we last gathered on June 6th, I've had 2 specific travels that I wanted to mention to the board. From Sunday through Tuesday, June 9th through 11th, I was in Washington, D.C. for cybersecurity advocacy, along with Tom Gazy, our Chief of Public Safety and Emergency Management. Jennifer Cohen, Director of Policy and Legislative Affairs, also joined us on the trip. Monday, we participated in a number of meetings, including a breakfast with Holland and Knight to lay out our cybersecurity plan, followed by a meeting with Congresswoman Debbie Lesko from Arizona, who is a ranking member of the House Homeland Security Committee and the Subcommittee on Transportation and Maritime Security. We also met with the chair of the Senate Homeland Security Committee and Governmental Affairs Full Committee, Ron Johnson from Wisconsin. Following that, we met with Elliot DeGroot, who is a legislative analyst for Representative Slotkin of Michigan. We also met with Jeanette Manfra, who is the Assistant Director of the Cybersecurity Division and Infrastructure at the security agency CISA. On Tuesday, we had further meetings along the lines of cybersecurity, including DHL and House meetings, including Senate Commerce Cybersecurity Majority Staff Sherry Pasco, representing Chairman Roger Wicker of Mississippi. We also met with Ranking Member John Katko of the House Homeland Security Committee and Subcommittee on Cybersecurity, Infrastructure Protection, and Innovation. Later, we met with Liz Amster, who is the Legislative Director for Congresswoman Kathleen Rice of New York, who is a member of the House Homeland Security Committee. And following that, we met with Congressman Mike Rogers from Alabama, the ranking House member and Homeland Security Full Committee member. And then closing, we met with Congressman Al Green's staff from the state of Texas to further discuss Homeland Security, operations and emergency preparedness, along with response and recovery activities. Later that week, from Wednesday to Thursday, June 12th and 13th, I was in Tacoma, Washington for the 31st Annual Agriculture Transportation Coalition Annual Meeting, the 31st meeting of that group. On the evening of the 12th, I attended and provided remarks at our annual dinner and talking about trade, our ongoing tariff debate, and the work that needs to be done in our agricultural sector, not only here in California, but nationwide. And on Thursday, I participated in a panel discussion on chassis, which was moderated by Mike Semananis of Louis Dreyfus Commodities, and joined on that panel with me were Jeff Lawrence of OSEMA, Val Noel of Track Intermodal, Charlie Wellens of FlexiVan, and Dick Craig from the North American Chassis Pool Cooperative. And that concludes my remarks for this morning.
Thank you, Gene. Any questions for the Executive Director? Hearing none.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to give a more robust report of closed session. Items 1 and item 2 were discussed. Mike DiBernardo was absent for item 2 as he is recused. Item 3 and item 4 were pulled. Item 5, we had one recusal, Commissioner Renwick. Item 6 was discussed. Item 7 was discussed. Mike DiBernardo was out of the room as he is recused. Item 8 was discussed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, item D, comments from the public on non-agenda items. Comment cards have not been submitted for this meeting. And for item E, the reports from the Neighborhood Council representative. No reports have been submitted to the office or on file or at this time. Item F, reports of the commissioners.
Commissioner Moreno.
June 10th, I had a tour of potential industries. June 14th, attended the 14th Annual ILWU PMA Luncheon. June 15th, attended the Wilmington Chamber of Commerce Annual Awards and Installation Dinner. And June 19th, plaque presentation and tour for the BAP Union, the tall ship from Peru. Thank you.
From June 16th through June 18th, I traveled to Detroit, Michigan with Mike DiBernardo.
On June 14th, I met with Catalina Sea Ranch over the phone.
On June 7th, I attended the Special Olympics Torch Walk Run. On June 14th, the 14th Annual ILW PMA Luncheon. On June 15th, Pride at the Port event. On June 19th, I appeared before City Council for confirmation for my reappointment. Thank you.
Next item, board committee reports. Item G, first item, the ACTA meeting on June 13th, 2019, when Commissioner Renwick.
Yes, we had another ACTA meeting. It was fairly uneventful, but ACTA continues to do very well.
Thank you. Next item is at ICTF meeting on June 18th, 2019, with Commissioner Moreno Linares.
Yes, I attended my first meeting, ICTF meeting in Long Beach, joint meeting. Nothing to report.
And the commissioner was elected president.
Wow.
You left that part out, Commissioner. Item H, there are no minutes on file at this moment for this agenda. Item I, presentation. The annual compliance report, bursts 302 through 305 with Chris Cannon, the Director of Environmental Management, is currently on his way to the podium to present.
Good morning, Commissioners. I think
Morning.
it's still morning. Good morning, Commissioners. Chris Cannon, Environmental Management Division. I'm here to deliver a environmental compliance status for the Berth 302 through 306 project. I believe you have copies of the presentation with you. So the Berth 302, 306 EIR required 34 mitigation measures and lease measures for a container terminal development project. The measures were incorporated into a permit. 733 with formerly Eagle Marine Services. It's now Phoenix Marine Services. They will need to have a name change that's going to have to be presented to the board at some time. Of 34 measures, 15 of them require an annual reporting to the board. This presentation covers the annual reporting for 2017 and 2018. In 2017, there was really only one thing that was required, and that was shore power. We publish shore power information on our website, as does the Air Resources Board. Just for your information, they were required to meet 70% plug-in, and they were at 80 or 90. We have a listing in the presentation of the 15 measures that require annual reporting to the board. And we're happy to report that the tenant is in compliance with all but one, 14 out of 15. The one that they're not in compliance with is the vessel speed reduction program, which requires that starting on January 1st, 2018, the berths 302, 306 project ships calling at that terminal would have to meet a speed of 12 knots between 40 nautical miles from Point Furman in the precautionary area, and the requirement is a 95% compliance, and their compliance rate was 83. So they're out of compliance, and so we have had meetings with them, and I'll describe those in a little bit, but we wanted to dig into the details a little bit to find out exactly what was going on. So we have a table shown in the presentation that I presented to you. We divided the activities, the movement in and out of the terminal into 4 segments, from 40 nautical miles to 20, then from 20 to 0, and then from 0 on the outbound to 20, and then 20 to 40. And the results were very interesting. You can see that they're at 95 to 98% on all the first 3, 40 to 20, 20 to 0, 0 to 20. They're at between 95 and 98% compliance, but they dropped to 71% compliance in the 20 to 40 on the outbound. And the reason is because, according to the terminal, they have a number of ships that have appointments up at Port of Oakland, and so they have to speed up in order to make their appointments. So we also have a listing of the actual ships that are out of compliance. They mostly are APL LTD operated ships, and we have the vessel names listed. There are also some reefers, although the last call ended in June, but they are not the majority of the ships that are not making this requirement. So for comparison, we looked at there are 4 container terminals operating in the San Pedro Bay that have a requirement of meeting 95% for shore power. Pier 300, Everport, Trepac, and Houston, and the only one that's not meeting it is the Pier 300. So when we talked to the terminal, we told them their competitors also have to do this, and so they were informed. So we finally, just to give you a little bit more detail of the actions that were taken, in the first half of 2018, we notified them of their requirement, obviously, to begin the year. We provide monthly data to them. They were notified to increase their percentages. As we saw, their monthly percentages were not meeting the requirement. We met with them in the middle of the year. We also had them submit a form verifying their noncompliance. As the year progressed, we continued to provide updated data to them. We sent a letter to them, and we had another meeting, we had another form, I should say, requiring them to verify their noncompliance. Finally, in the beginning of this year, in 2019, we gave them the updated VSR data with annual numbers to confirm that they did not meet their 2018 requirement. We sent them another letter to also indicate that they were out of compliance. But the good news is that in those conversations and meetings, the tenant actually gave us a letter indicating that the shipping lines, the APL shipping lines that were not meeting the requirement to slow down to 12 knots, they indicated that those shipping lines would now meet that requirement. And so our next steps are going to be to continue to work with the tenant on a monthly basis to ensure that compliance. And we will provide periodic status reports to you throughout the year to confirm the status of their compliance. And obviously, we do publish VSR data online, and so we'll continue to do that. I can tell you that as of now, they're up to 89%. So they're getting closer to where they need to be, but they're still not there. And so by the end of the year, they tell us they believe that they'll make the 95% requirement. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Yeah, so when we looked at which ships were non-compliant, there were some relatively smaller reefer ships that were non-compliant,
That's right.
but there was also a lot of APL-controlled ships.
That's right.
Why I would, that surprises me that you know, APL and is a subsidiary of the same company that runs the terminal. So I guess maybe they no longer run the terminal, I apologize. But anyway, why would the APL have a hard time meeting this requirement?
Well, first of all, the terminal said that they don't control the ships. The ships have to take action based on their own appointments. The APL ships are the ones that have the appointments up in Oakland. That being said, they did say that they were going to work more closely with those ships and work more closely with their appointments and scheduling to try to get them to comply. So they said they were going to work on it, but their initial story was that they did not have the ability to control the ships.
Again, I know the terminal doesn't control the ships. So now the next question is, you know, the ship has to be equipped to plug in to the shore power, but if it's not, then there are other alternatives. Why were they unable to employ these other alternatives?
So this is vessel speed reduction, not shore
I
power.
apologize. My fault.
And no, it's all right. We mix them up all the time. So this is just literally a timing question.
Just a little clarification. So we keep sending letters. Is there any consequence to those letters? Is there any kind of penalty, or is it just letting you know that you're not compliant? And then two, what is the significance of them not being compliant? When they don't reduce, what is that creating in the area?
So the answer to the first question is that the requirements to comply with mitigation measures are contained in the lease. And so if they're in violation of mitigation measures, then they are not in full compliance with their lease. And so the obligations to enforce the lease are available to the port as needed.
Could you give some examples of what that enforcement could be?
I think you would have to, I would have to defer to council as exactly what procedures they would go through, but you would provide a notice to comply and proceed further with potential default measures. But I'll leave that to council to describe how best to describe that.
Okay.
Or to comply, to carry that out.
That is correct. We put them on notice to correct the area where they are not in compliance. And if that correction doesn't take place, then we would proceed as a violation of the contract. And then that would probably mean a potential eviction, ultimately.
So your second question was about what's the consequence, or not consequence, but what's the effect? The effect is the reason we do vessel speed reduction is reduction in environmental impacts. The big areas of environmental impacts that are affected by vessel speed reduction are CO2, greenhouse gas emissions, NOx, and PM. Those are the big ones. And so particularly with NOx and with fuel use, which translates to CO2, you have an increase in NOx and you have an increase in greenhouse gas emissions and CO2 equivalent. It's only in that one segment, so I would say it's not as terrible as if it were throughout the entire 4 segments. But the fact is, the emissions are higher in that final segment, and so the impact to greenhouse gas is global. The impact to NOx is more local.
Excuse me, Commissioners, this is Mike. So in addition, to what Chris had said, they're trying to make an appointment up in Oakland. So they were working against some odds over at the terminal where there was a lot of volume there and their ships were being delayed. So they needed to get it out of the port and get it up to Oakland to make the window that they need to get the cargo off over there and get other cargo back on, the military cargo, especially to Guam. So that's why the rush to get out, and that's why the numbers are high on the outbound. Looking at the April numbers, and I know Chris said that they're getting there, looking at the April numbers for those same ships, they're at 100% right now. So they have definitely corrected. So they're on a path, and we look at it over the year, so that's why we're looking at the average over the year. That's what these numbers reflect. So,
Yeah, the 89% is the average thus far throughout the year. But yes, they're up to 100% now in that 1 month, yes.
So Mike, you think it was being driven by congestion at the terminal?
congestion at the terminal, some productivity issues over at that particular terminal, so they were trying to make up that time and getting it back up to Oakland. So, and that's why it's only noted on the outbound. They're doing their job on the inbound. It's the outbound that was the issue.
And it's only the last part of the outbound. They out for the first 20 nautical miles, they're fine. It's just they have to jump on the gas when they get to 20.
Any further questions? Thank you, Chris.
Next, item J, Level 1 Coastal Development Permit. Our Executive Director has approved 2 Level 1 CDPs, number 1906 and number 1907. CDP number 1906, the Yankovich Company, a modular office building, fencing, and a monument sign, and CDP 1907 for innovative terminal services to relocate maintenances and repair shop operations utilities at 1251 New Dock Street. At this time, do any of the board members request to have these level 1 permits removed from today's agenda onto a subsequent agenda?
Hearing none. Oh, Commissioner Middleton.
One simple question, I don't want it held out. On the innovative terminal services, what do they do?
So Innovative does chassis repairs for some of the terminals and for the chassis providers.
Thank you.
Yes, welcome.
No further comment. We'll move on to the next item. Category K, the board reports of the Executive Director. Consent items number 1 through 9 are on the consent calendar. Commissioners, are there any questions on any of these items?
I requested that 6, 7, and 8 be held out for brief questioning.
Noted.
And
6, 7, and 8.
Noted. Thank you.
Oh, okay, thank you.
item 5, please.
Noted. Thank you. So we'll read items 1 through 4, number 9 into the record. Item 1 for collective vote. Item 1 is a resolution to approve First Amendment to Agreement Number E-6975 between the City of Los Angeles Harbor Department and California Dining Services. Item 2 is a resolution for the First Amendment to Agreement Number 163407 between the City of Los Angeles Harbor Department and Macias, Guinea, and O'Connell LLP to provide financial auditing and related services. Item 3 is a resolution for the approval of Foreign Trade Zone Usage-Driven General Purpose Operating Agreement between the City of Los Angeles Harbor Department and Toshiba Logistics America, Inc., FTZ 202 Site 58. And item 4 is a resolution for the approval of Foreign Trade Zone Usage-Driven General Purpose Operating Agreement between the City of Los Angeles Harbor Department and Apex Logistics International, Inc., FTZ 202, Site 57. And item 9 is a resolution for the approval of Commission President Jamie L. Lee to travel on a business development trip to Oakland and San Francisco, California.
Thank you. May I please have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That motion carries. Thank you.
Okay, item 5. Item 5 is a resolution for the approval of Second Amendment to the Foreign Trade Zone Usage-Driven General Purpose Operating Agreement number 09-2749 between the City of Los Angeles Harbor Department and Ask Marine, Inc., FTZ 202, Site 15, and we have Eric Karras here at the...
Thank you. And I don't have a problem with it getting approved. I just had a question. I was curious what happens at that place. I drive by it and it looks clean to me. I don't see their trucks blocking the roadway as other pieces of property nearby do. I just want to know. I'm just curious what happens there.
Yes, Commissioners, good afternoon. I actually went to the facility for different, somewhat related issues this week on Tuesday with Masa Morimoto, who manages the Foreign Trade Zone program for us. So we went inside the facility. They've been there for about 13 years. Inside is actually very, very clean. The warehouse is actually really spectacular. You could almost eat off the ground. It's really amazing. And they handle what I would describe as beautiful cargo. It's actually really, really fantastic, the way it's wrapped and packaged, but it's machinery. Some of it is medical equipment. Some of it is molding type of equipment, but it's all nicely packaged in some type of aluminum boxes, crates, and it fits exactly within a 40-foot or a 20-foot container. So it's actually really very nice to see the way it comes out even. But they do the traditional transloading. Sometimes they have out-of-gauge or oversized cargo that comes in on a platform or a flat rack, and then they basically handle it and strip it and deliver it to the final customer. So it's a traditional FTZ transloading distribution type of equipment of machinery, molding machinery, medical equipment that comes from Japan and from Europe.
How many people are employed there?
I didn't see too many, actually, when I was there. Maybe it wasn't their busiest time, but if I had to go just on what I saw, actually, I think we put it in the board report as well, but what I saw then, probably around 10, 12 people or something in that area that I saw walking around. But again, it was maybe not the busiest time of the day. Let me see here, what did we say?
I don't see it.
It says 8 full-time and part-time, so I'm not too far off.
All right. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions?
If there are no further questions, may I please have a motion to approve Agenda Item 5?
So moved.
In a second?
Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That motion carries. Thank you, Eric.
Next, item number 6 is a resolution for the approval of agreement between the City of Los Angeles Harbor Department and Kit Cole Consulting for environmental advocacy representation. And at the podium is David Libatique.
Hello,
Do you
Commissioners.
want me to mention that? Oh, sorry. Sorry, David. Commissioner Middleton is asking, since your questions apply to both items 6 and 7, if both need to be read into.
Sure. Item 7 is a resolution for the approval of agreement between the City of Los Angeles Harbor Department and Nossman LLP for environmental advocacy representation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioners, David Libatique, Deputy Executive Director, Stakeholder Engagement. The Government Affairs Division is requesting approval for agreements with Kit Cole and Nossman to conduct environmental advocacy on behalf of the Port of Los Angeles in conjunction with our Government Affairs team and Environmental Management Division. We are engaged in a broadening front of activity in terms of environmental regulation, rulemaking, and policy at the federal, state, and regional level. These are complex issues that are tightly interrelated and need to be coordinated. Right now, the bulk of this work is falling onto a small number of staff in EMD, in the Environmental Management Division, as well as Government Affairs. So Kit Cole will provide support with AQMD policy and rulemaking, while Nossman will provide support at the state level with the Air Resources Board and at the federal level with the Environmental Protection Agency. For specifics on their respective scopes of work, I would defer to the Environmental Management Division. And Chris Cannon is here to take any questions on that front.
Commissioner Middleton.
Thank you. My questions on both of these is first to state what I think is generally what these are about, and then I have one question that I think can be addressed with both of them at the same time in the interest of saving time. Looks to me like 6 is a resolution about an agreement between the City of LA and Kit Cole, and it's $7,000 a month, it's $84,000 a year. It appears that Kit Cole focuses primarily on the AQMD, while the next one, 7, with Nossman, is EPA and I want to say CARB.
The California Air Resources Board.
Air Resources Board, and that's $11,000 a month. Now, what my question is I understand, it all has to do with scope of work. And I read the attachments that detail the scope of work, and perhaps it's just my ignorance that I didn't understand all of it, but it's identifying grant opportunities and so on. Is this outreach to constituent groups at all? Is it strictly working with the agencies? And I understand there's a considerable amount of work involved. I just don't know what it is, and I'd like a little more information on
Sure.
sort of what we're paying for and the services that these companies will provide.
It's a combination of both. It's work with the agencies as well as relevant stakeholder groups that are engaged with those agencies on rulemaking or policy development that affect port priorities. So with respect to AQMD, for example, AQMD is hosting meetings regarding AB 617 implementation and the creation of community emission reduction plans. That is both community outreach as well as engagement with AQMD staff. There are ongoing policy discussions with ARB regarding at-birth regulation. That is a combination of work with the agency itself as well as coordination with stakeholders we deem to be partners in the industry and formulating a position that is agreeable to all involved. So it is going to be a combination of both, and really what these firms are going to help us do is to tell our story. At its core, what we're trying to do is make sure we preserve the ability for the Port of Los Angeles to implement and execute its Clean Air Action Plan and work cooperatively with these agencies. So Kit Cole and Nossman will help us tell our story at the state, federal, and local level.
And Mr. Lebetique, will they actually represent the port, or will they simply give advice, and will it be port people that will be interfacing with the community and the agencies? Or
They will
both?
be supporting port staff engaged.
Okay, so they're basically giving us advice and determining how to proceed best with policy implications and implementations. True?
Yes, Commissioner. And they will act and behave much like our advocates at the state and federal level. So in some instances, they will have to represent us, but with tight coordination and tight direction given by port staff.
Okay. Thank you.
If there are no further questions, may I please have a motion to approve consent agenda items 6 and 7? I have a
Second.
motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 8 is a resolution for an agreement between the City of Los Angeles Harbor Department and Empathia Pacific, Inc.
Marla Blevins, Deputy Executive Director and Chief Financial Officer. I'm available to answer any questions you might have about this contract with Empathia for employee assistance
Okay.
Commissioner Middleton.
services.
Just one quick question. This is a very modest contract, $40,000 over 3 years, $120,000. I had a question. It says that Empathia is going to be a resource for employees struggling with a number of issues, all of which are very important. Now, I presume that there's insurance policies that cover the actual provision of things like therapy, alcohol and drug counseling, and so on. So my question is, what exactly does Empathia do under this contract? Is it referrals only, or do they actually provide services? Is it minimal consulting? What do they do?
So Empathia actually provides the counseling services. They're licensed to provide those services, and each Harbor Department employee is entitled to 8 free sessions with Empathia.
To how many?
8. So anything above and beyond 8, then they get referred to another service to which they would have to pay for themselves.
Okay, because I know, for example, with alcohol and drug services, I mean, there's different standards, 30 days, 90 days, whatever, but I mean, a 90-day program would be tens of thousands of dollars, and this is such a modest, so we don't provide that level of service. We just kind of indicate to people the direction they should be going.
So we pay $2.20 per employee per month. So there's about 1,000 Harbor Department employees. So that's about $2,200 per month, $26,400 per year. And that entitles every single Harbor Department employee to 8 counseling sessions through Empathia. If the issue that they're having goes beyond that, then they get referred to another provider and they would have to pay for that themselves. So intensive drug and alcohol counseling that would last like an inpatient program for 90 days, the Harbor Department is not paying for that.
Okay, and when we say 8 sessions, would it actually be counseling? In other words, if they needed to see a psychologist, a psychiatrist, does Empathia do that, or is it in a more general nature? Do they
Yes,
make referrals, in other words?
Yes, it's 8 sessions with a licensed psychologist.
Got it. Thank you. No other questions?
Thank you. May I please have a motion to approve consent agenda item 8?
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you.
Item number 10 is a resolution for the order resetting compensation under permit number 306 with Ultramar Inc., and we have Mike Galvin at the podium presenting.
Good morning, Mike Galvin, Director of Waterfront and Commercial Real Estate. This is an order for resetting of compensation under permit number 306 with Ultramar, otherwise known as Valero. Their marine terminal is in Wilmington, occupies about 13 acres in Wilmington. The reset of compensation will be effective from February 2019 through 2024. The compensation reset will go from about $575,000 to $1.94 million per year for land rent. They paid about $1.4 million also in wharfage and dockage in the last year, so our estimated overall compensation will equate to about $314,000 per year per acre. This does not include a CPI reset on an annualized basis. That'll require an amendment to their permit, which we will continue to pursue with them, but this gets us to back to market rent from where we were from the holdover position that this permit's been in since 2001. So it's a good step in the right direction. We're also pursuing a long-term lease with Valero for their modems project, which will be a 30-year lease that will also incorporate CPI into that business transaction as well. If there's any questions I can answer at this time.
Commissioner Middleton.
Do you want to go first? Oh, you can go. Okay. Mr. Galvin, I'm sure you have excellent answers, but I have to say this one was a shocker, because when I think of a holdover and an inability to reach an agreement, I'm thinking of 6 months, 9 months, whatever. It appears this was held over for 18 years. Was there no rent agreement from 2001 to the present?
There's been a series of failed negotiations with Valero, and also different types of opinions that we've received over time as to what we could do with the holdover permit as far as a compensation reset. So this is one of the first holdover permits that I've actually seen go through a compensation reset. So over the course of time, since my history here, since 2004, we've been trying to reset, but the opinions we're getting, we got legally, were different over time, and we were also engaged in negotiations trying to reset this the conventional way. So eventually we got to a point where we couldn't. We got a favorable opinion from the city attorney on how we could reset this through a means of the existing permit and not going outside the permit to a new negotiation where we would have had to threaten termination of the existing agreement. So that allowed us to finally move forward with it, but there were a lot of stops and starts in the meantime. There are operational issues related to Valero getting out of unrelated tankage on this property, but related to property that they occupy from the LADWP, as well as the ongoing modems negotiations. So there were a variety of different factors going on at the time. It is a long period of time, shouldn't have been that long, but to some degree our hands were tied because of the different types of opinions we're getting and how we could reset a holdover permit.
Okay. I'm sorry, but I really need to break that down very slowly, okay? As I understand it, there's both the question of the permit and the tariff. Under permit 306, there's a minimum annual guarantee. One aspect of this is land rent.
Yes.
But then there's also wharfage and dockage.
Yes.
As I understand it, the land rent is going to increase as set forth in the report. You don't say if the wharfage and dockage are going to increase. I understand the land rent is going from $485 to $1.9 million and change, but what happens to the wharfage and the dockage?
The wharfage and dockage is assessed through the tariff, and so that is based on whatever rates are set in the tariff for both dockage and wharfage of different commodities that are coming over the wharf there, and so that is not reset based on a compensation reset. The compensation reset in the permit is very specific only to land rent. The tariff items are changed when the tariff is changed generally, whether that's through an overall rate increase or specific items being increased, but that's a separate process from what is prescribed in the permit, which is only for land rent to be changed.
Are we going to get more, is the port going to realize more income as a result of the tariff?
As a result of the tariff, we do receive income over and above land rent as a result
I know,
of the tariff.
but is the wharfage and dockage going to increase for the period 2019 through 2024?
I think what he's saying is that the tariff is dictated for all companies, correct?
Yes, it's
And
consistent.
it doesn't vary.
It does not vary.
It does not
Okay.
vary.
Then let's get to the real issue. What was the rent in 2001, and what happened to the rent for 18 years? Did it continue at the same level, or were there any sorts of increases? And I guess I should ask, since this was held over for 18 years, did we collect any rent?
We collected rent. The rent has been $575,000 and some change. The land rent has been that much. Their wharfage and dockage has continued to increase over time as their volumes have gone up over time, and as there have been adjustments to the wharfage rates based on changes in the tariff in the period of time between 2001 and 2018. So there were a series of rate increases, general rate increases in the tariff in 2004 and 2005. There was also another general rate increase, I believe it was in about 2012, that have increased overall revenue coming from the facility through those tariff items, but the land rent has stayed constant, $575,000 and some change since 2001, but that has been collected on a quarterly basis.
Okay,
Can I just interrupt for a second?
sure, that's
Okay.
the question I wanted.
So, look, I enjoy watching Mike on the hot seat, and so I hate.
Not the hot seat.
I hate to
Commissioner,
intervene.
Just some questions about 18 years with no.
I hate to intervene. Okay, so look, your shock and frustration is eminently justified. Now, that said, it's not fair to direct it at Mike because he's been sort of cleaning up a mess that when I joined the port was endemic in a number of contracts. So basically, historically, the port has never charged a CPI. And so as a result, when we're negotiating every 5 years, the person we're negotiating with has no incentive to cut a deal. They have every incentive in the world to delay cutting a deal because they keep their old rent. So our first reform was to start insisting upon CPI increases. And the goal is uncapped CPI, because if this had been an uncapped CPI, we would not have a problem, right?
There would be a differential between that
There
and
would
market
be.
rent, but it would have been a lot less, yes.
Right. So that's the first way we've gone about trying to fix this problem. Now, with modems, it's even more complicated because these modem terminals were built under one set of regulations, and those regulations have since changed. And so we need to get those terminals to invest significantly in their infrastructure. And as part of that, our strategy is also to give them responsibility for a lot of the maintenance of the facility because they're best able to do it. So what you are seeing is a holdover, and it's one of the worst I've seen, but it's in the process of being fixed, and staff is very much aware of this. And I don't know if when you see our monthly key performance indicators, one thing that is tracked now, this is another reform that we instituted when Gene and the current management team came in, is we track how many permits are on holdover and how many holdovers are coming up. And you've seen over time these things coming down and down and down and down. So with that said, I really think that you should continue flaying Mike because it's fun. But but that said, he's part of the cleanup crew.
Let me say in response to that, just to make it perfectly clear, I have very high regard for every member of the staff that I have encountered. You do a great job. I'm not interested in morality, and I'm not interested in sitting in judgment. So this isn't about fault. This is about numbers. And when you're running a business and rent doesn't increase in 18 years, it's a question. It's not about flaying anyone. It's about, is there some way to recoup that? Because 18 years, I mean, if we just look at 3% a year, even though I understand there's no CPI, but it is amazing to me that it could be 18 years with, let's just let this go along and not collect any more rent. And I'm certainly happy that the situation's been changed, and I'll look forward to seeing those documents Commissioner Renwick talks about with holdovers. But I think something should be said on the record that we are looking at this, we have noted it, and we hope it's going to be better. And it's not personal fault, it's just fix it.
Agreed. It's
Done.
completely intolerable.
Okay, thank you.
That's why they're.
Okay.
Just one more thing to note as well, this, Mike. Some of our permits that are on holdover, some of them have 125% or even 150% if they go into holdover. I don't think this particular permit had it because of the age, right, Mike?
It did have it, but someone at that time decided that they weren't going to enforce that, which was to some degree systemic in how things were dealt with back in that time frame. And so oftentimes these 150% clauses would come into effect, and the tenant would come and advocate for a position that, well, we're in negotiations, there's no reason to do that at this time, and so they ended up not doing that. We obviously do not follow that policy anymore. If there is a 150% kicker, it goes in automatically at this point, because that is our best leverage to get them to negotiate back to market. But in this case, it wasn't done. It was a different business attitude at the time, and we have a different business attitude now.
Is everyone prepared to fix it? Okay.
Yes.
May I have a motion to approve agenda item 10, please?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Item number 11 is a resolution for the award and approval of construction contractor, Manson Construction Company, burst 226 through 236, terminal improvement specifications number 2770. And presenting at the podium is Sean Sharistani.
Good afternoon, Sean Sharistani, Construction Division. It is my pleasure this afternoon to be recommending award of a construction contract at our berth 226-236 terminal improvements, Everport Terminal. I believe you have a copy of the handout, so we'll be following that. The second page of your handout shows the location of the Everport Terminal, which is basically across the way, across the channel from where we are currently. On the third page of the handout, you see the more detailed view of the Everport Terminal. I'll start with the area depicted in red. Basically, that's along the wharf. As part of the Sixth Amendment to Permit 888 between the Harbor Department and Everport, we will be performing the following improvements. Again, along the wharf, the area shown in red, we will be installing a sheet pile wall to deepen the channel to minus 53 feet, which is will be the same as our main channel, allowing the larger vessels to be able to berth at this facility. And the second item of work is what you see here shown in yellow, and that is the upgrade of the electrical system, in addition to replacing the main electrical substation to accommodate the alternative maritime power capability, and as well as the crane, the gantry crane power upgrade. And finally, the area that's shown on the right side of this page is an area shown in green. That is a 1.5 acre of backland that will be improved as part of this work. So I'd like to talk about some of the contract highlights, if I may. The project was advertised on November 15, 2018, and we received 3 bids. Manson Construction Company was the lowest responsible bidder at about $50 million. So compared to the engineer's estimate, this bid came out higher. And we are seeing the trend of cost escalation due to the economic conditions, both labor and material, and we've received a couple of more bids in the last few months, and we are seeing that trend going up, and I think that's the reason for the bids coming higher than the engineer's estimate. So if the board were to approve this contract today, we anticipate starting construction in August of this year for a 25-month period ending in September 2021. There were requirements for small business and very small business enterprise requirement on this contract, and as can be seen on this page, Manson Construction has got a commitment to exceed those percentages. And finally, this project is subject to the provisions of the project labor agreement that was approved by the board and the City Council in 2016. So this concludes my brief presentation. If there are any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you. Any questions? Yes. Commissioner Middleton.
First, sir, I want to make sure
Microphone.
want to make sure I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Mr.
Sean, you can go by
Shahrastani?
Sean.
Nah, I can do Shahrastani.
Okay, perfect.
All right. Mr. Shahrastani, a couple questions. Just because I'm unfamiliar with the process, when you award a bid, I understand that there's a procedure that must be followed, and that there's a team, and that you look at various factors, and I think you even attach some of that in terms of what you look at and how you rate. Am I correct in assuming that when you evaluate bids, you don't always go with the lowest bidder? You look at a number of other factors.
Well, let me, if I may, just very briefly. So, construction bids are covered in general by the Public Contracting Code in the state of California, and general with the LA City Charter and the Admin Code. And we are to award to the lowest responsive bidder. What does that mean? So when we open bids, there's a lowest bidder, apparent lowest bidder. So we declare it, it's a public setting, and everybody's invited to come, and we open bids one by one as we set a timeline, and usually it's about 2:45 p.m. On a particular day of the week. And when we open it, we declare the lowest apparent bidder at that point. However, that's just a start of the process of evaluation. It takes us about 2 to 3 weeks to review all the documents that we've been given. So they have been apparent, but now they need to be responsive to all the requirements of the specifications or the contract. And we evaluate all that in accordance with our specification and contract documents. We have a checklist that we go through one by one, and it's a couple of pages long, including checks of reference for responsibility. And if they worked for us in the past, obviously we know their performance. So there's a responsiveness, and there's also a responsibility factor. So that's just a very brief overview, and we can set some other time to come in and make it a lot more detailed presentation and walk you through all that.
Okay, that was great. I'm responsible and responsive covers a whole wide range, and I don't want to know everything on the 2 or 3 pages. But what I'm concerned about is there somewhere where you look at the following factors, and we can either take them one at a time, but it's just in general, do you at least look at this? 1, litigation history.
Yes.
Okay, because I know we can't just go by what we read in the newspapers, but certainly nothing connected to the Port of LA, but when I read about public works contractors that have been involved in extensive litigation with the agency they're now coming back to again, it's like, well, wait a second, if you didn't perform the first time around, why are we giving you more work? So you do look at their history.
Absolutely, and we do have a very good relationship with the Department of Public Works, what is called Office of Contract Compliance. That's the first thing we would do. We would call them up to see on their database. First of all, we know if we worked with them in the past, but they have a much bigger database, so we will contact with them, not only talk about the legal, whether there's been a lawsuit with the City of LA. Now, there can be lawsuits. Were they found guilty of that lawsuit? That's the key. And if they were, then that would raise a flag. The second thing we also look at is also looking at whether they've had major violations of, paying their what is called the certified payrolls, paying appropriately to all the laborers that worked on that project. So that is basically part of their responsibility. And of course, we check with the state of California to make sure that they have a valid California license to perform work in the state of California. So some of those, very briefly, some of those things that we check as part of this process.
And I assume, again, don't want to get into depth about each of them, but in addition to litigation history, you look at things like completion, timely completion.
Yes, we do.
And competence.
Yes, absolutely.
At some point, there has to be, was the work performed in accordance with the bid documents?
Yes, and then if it's a new contractor, besides checking with Office of Compliance, we will go ahead and get references from the bidder and we will call the references to make sure, again, that falls in the responsibility part of it.
Okay. Do I correctly understand? And again, because this is such a large contract, I really went over every document that was attached, every page that was attached. Do I correctly assume none of the work is being done by the Harbor Department, that this is all subcontracted?
All the work that's shown in here is performed by
Manson.
Manson, and
Or
also
their
their
subs.
subs. Right.
Got it. Okay, and then one last question, and forgive me, I know we talked about this at a prior meeting. I read the legends. I know what SBE and VSBE is.
I apologize.
Pardon?
Yeah, go ahead.
But encompassed in small business and very small business, does that include what I would call weebie and meebie, women business and minority? Is that a factor we take into account in these bids?
If I may, the passing of Proposition 209 in the state of California actually does not allow us to award based on MBE, WBE. What we found when we actually established our small business program, because the WBE and MBE was found illegal, or proposition was passed, that we implemented the small business program. It's interesting enough that when we implemented that in 2007, we actually tracked the MBE and WBE of these small businesses, and the percentages continue to going up. So we track that as part of this. I think our contracts and purchasing has a database that I believe annually they come back here and report to the board.
Okay, and then my final question, sir, and you're doing a great job, really good answers.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much, very clear presentation. The page that says contract highlights, the reason I asked if the Harbor Department was going to do any work, because when it talks about SBE and VSBE, I'm making the assumption, but I want you to confirm and tell me if I'm right, that the Harbor Department required participation levels are 17 and 5 respectively, but Manson made a commitment over and above what the Harbor Department required.
That's correct.
Okay, and when we look at those numbers, 17% SBA, does that mean that a dollar amount? Is it a percentage of the total contract?
Yes, it would be a percentage of the total construction contract.
Got it.
And I think there is a attachment in the board report that shows all the subcontractors and the amounts of all the SBE and VSBE percentages.
That's what I looked at. Thank you, sir.
Oh, my pleasure.
Commissioner Renwick.
Just to add on to that, the port has an amazingly successful program for SBEs and VBEs. So I believe the number I read was over the last decade, about $350 million worth of contracts going to very small businesses and small businesses. And it's just a remarkable thing. And when you compare us to the city as a whole, we far out-achieve the rest of the city.
And I believe part of that is because we do have a mandatory requirement, whereas other agencies may have a good faith effort. So I think that made it quite different. And again, thanks to the commission, the legal staff, and everybody else to make that happen for us.
And just finally, to give kudos where it belongs. So there's a whole team of folks in the purchasing department that focus on exactly this and go to a bunch of conferences and meet all of the potential contractors. So we really do go out of our way.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, may I please have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve item 12.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That motion carries.
Thank you.
Sean.
If I may just add, that was item 11, I believe.
That was item 11.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Moving on to item 12 is a resolution for grant acceptance and approval of a grant agreement award number ARV 17-049 with the California Energy Commission and approval of a funding agreement with the South Coast Air Quality Management District to implement an advanced infrastructure demonstration project. And at the podium presenting is Chris Cannon.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Chris Cannon, Environmental Management Division. There's two things going on here, and they work together. The first is a California Energy Commission Advanced Infrastructure Grant. They released a grant solicitation in 2018 for $23 million worth of grants. The Harbor Department and the West Basin Container Terminal applied for a grant and received a preliminary award of $7.8 million to demonstrate a wireless charging system to support 10 zero-emission battery electric yard tractors. As part of the match, the Harbor Department will cover the in-house staff time for managing the grant, which is estimated to be about $80,000. In parallel, the U.S. EPA Targeted Airshed Program offers grants to local air districts to incentivize the deployment of low and/or zero emissions projects. In this case, the South Coast Air Quality Management District, in partnership with the West Basin Container Terminal and the Harbor Department, applied for and received a grant to purchase and demonstrate 10 battery electric yard tractors. The grant will cover the incremental cost of the 10 yard tractors, that is to say the difference in cost between diesel yard tractors, which are the normal ones they operate, and the zero-emission versions that would be demonstrated. The Harbor Department would like to provide a cost share of $312,500 to assist in the purchase of the electric yard tractors. So the project would be to install 10 inductive charging systems at the West Basin Container Terminal equipment fueling area for regular charging of these 10 battery electric yard tractors. And then there will actually be 2 more charging pads at the brake facility for opportunity charging. The inductive charging systems are manufactured by Wave, and they're currently tested in other locations, including even at the Harbor Department, but also for bus transits. That we would also install a battery storage system to reduce this peak demand charges, and then West Basin will demonstrate 10 battery electric yard tractors to determine if this type of charging system could fit into their terminal operations. So we're asking you to accept and approve the grant agreement between the City of Los Angeles Harbor Department and the California Energy Commission in the amount of $7,842,270, and also approved a funding agreement between the City of Los Angeles Harbor Department and the South Coast Air Quality Management District in the amount of $312,500 to support the demonstration of this equipment. And then there is a picture for you. There are 2 pictures actually of the equipment that are in the presentation. One of them looks so much like the real thing that but it's not. It's actually the one on the left and bottom left is an artist's rendering, but it's such a good artist rendering you can hardly tell. But you can kind of see what the charging systems will look like. They're sort of boxes that are to the right of each of the pieces of equipment, and that's where the electrical equipment would be housed, and then underneath each of the yard tractors is where there's a pad, and that's where the charging would occur. And then on the upper right there is a close-up picture of one of the battery electric yard tractors.
Thank you, Chris. Any questions for Mr. Cannon? Commissioner Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. Cannon. I love these charts because it always helps in terms of breaking down. So I'm going to turn your attention to page 5 of 7. And first of all, just a preliminary question from looking at the photos. So this battery electric yard tractor is what's called a UTR?
That's right.
Okay. And the idea would be that eventually, if these are feasible, they would replace the diesel-operated UTRs. So
That's
this
right.
is the demonstration project.
That's right.
Okay. I'm trying to break down the total cost of the 11+ million, and that's why the chart is helpful, because I'm looking at hard numbers, and it sounds like WPCT is going to look at the basic cost. Now, you have one number missing, and that'll solve a lot of the questions for me, or answer a lot of the questions. If the basic cost of an old-fashioned yard tractor is $120,000, and there's 10 of them, then the question is, what's the differential between the old-fashioned basic diesel at $120,000 and the new battery-operated? What do they cost per unit?
They're about $300,000 per unit. I've got the project manager here with me.
That answers it.
Yes.
Because if it's about $300,000, then that means the $3 million, rounding off, that WBCT is putting in, is WBCP is paying for the cost of the machines, and that's the $3 million. And then the balance of the 11 million is infrastructure to build the charging stations?
Basically, yes.
Okay, so again, not our job here to break down exactly what costs how much, but these little boxes that you showed,
Yes.
that's $8 million we're looking at.
They're expensive.
That's what I'm asking. Because I'm going to say it looks like a charging station is. I understand it's not quite like plugging something into the wall.
Well, so just to point out that, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, I just wanted to point out that this is a demonstration project. And usually when you look at prototype equipment, it tends to be more expensive than the actual commercial application when it finally is applied. So the initial equipment is expensive. These things are not yet in commercial deployment and operation at terminals. And so yes, they are a little pricey.
Okay? Now, if we look at the question of funding and who's paying what, again, I'm going to round it down and not get into each individual dollar, but it looks like the total cost of this project is $11,400,000. And of that, almost $8,000 is the CEC grant, and of the matching money of $3.5 million, WBCT and WAVE are providing the majority of that, so the Harbor Department cash outlay is $392,000 plus. Is that correct?
That's right.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
So, well, actually, let me make that a little clear. You said cash outlay. So let's be clear. The $312,500 is a cash outlay. $80,000 is in-kind staff costs.
Thank you.
Just to add on to that, so one of our strategies in environmental protection is to facilitate the grant receipts in the harbor community. And so staff has done a great job here and lots of other places of going out and getting these grants. And part of it, I don't know why he's laughing at me, part of it is requirement for co-investment. And so we have our partners do the co-investing. The goal is we should be a facilitator,
Got it.
not a cash provider.
Excellent. Thank
Hey,
you.
one more thing to point out, too. I think it was mentioned replacing diesel equipment. This particular terminal is running LPG UTRs.
Thank you. That's right.
So a little bit different from everybody else. They're running LPG UTRs.
Thank you. That's right.
If there are no further questions, may I please have a motion to approve agenda item 12?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That motion carries. Thank you.
Agenda items 13 and 14 shall be presented together with an independent vote, as there is a recusal with Commissioner Remick on item number 14. But item 13 is a resolution for authorizing the Los Angeles Board of Harbor Commissioners to approve the issuance of the City of Los Angeles Harbor Department 2019 refunding revenue bonds. And item number 14 is the authorization of the appointment of underwriting firms to lead the negotiated sale in conjunction with the issuance of the City of Los Angeles Harbor Department 2019 refunding revenue bonds. And at the podium is Sohaila Sajadian presenting.
Sohaila Sajadian, Debt and Treasury.
Wait, can I stop you for 1 second? There's two motions. One of them I have to absent myself for. Are we going
That's
to,
correct, item 14.
Item number 14.
so can we do the one I should be here for? Because I think this is the
That is
last
the
one.
one.
Yeah.
That's what
Got
you,
it. And then
They're
I'll-
presented together.
Got it, okay.
Correct.
we'll tell you when to go.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
The hook out, you know.
Good afternoon, President Lee and Harbor Commissioners. The item before you is approval of refunding, that is to refinance Harbor Department's 2009 Series A and C bonds. We'll be going through the slides presentation package that you probably have a copy. We'll be covering Pola's debt portfolio, 2009 Series and A and C bonds, and finally proposed transaction. At June 30th, 2019, total outstanding bonded debt for the Harbor Department will be $810.1 million. In upcoming fiscal year 1920, POLA will be paying debt service of $85.4 million. The semi-annual debt service payments are due every February 1st and August 1st. So subsequent to August 1st debt service payment in 2019, the outstanding debt balance will be reduced to $763.6 million. Total outstanding for 2009, these are the bonds that are being proposed to be refinanced or refunded. A and C bonds is $220.6 million subsequent to the debt service payment of August 1st. Outstanding and callable for 2009 Series A will be $61.3 million with final maturity in year 2029. And for 2009 Series C bonds will have outstanding $159.3 million, which only the portion that is callable is $154.3 million, with final maturity of year 2031. The non-callable portion, which is $5 million, will mature in 2021, and Harbor Department will continue to service debt on those series until they mature in 2021. So total refunding callable bonds will be $215.6 million. The 2019 refunding transaction will result in no additional debt for the Harbor Department with no extension of maturities. The combined refunding of 2009 Series A and C bonds will result in estimated average annual savings of $4.2 million in debt service payments through year 2031. Present value savings of $35.5 million or 16.45%. I have to add that the debt policy requires minimum 3% for any refunding to take place. And here we are actually estimating 16.45% present value savings on this transaction. Total interest cost on the 2019 refunding revenue bonds is estimated to be about 1.87%. As a comparison, the total interest cost on the original bonds for Series C, which was a buyback bonds, was 4.7% 10 years ago. And for Series A and B was 5.1%. So the new refunding is to be issued in 3 series. Series A would be subject to AMT. This is actually for the investors who invest in these bonds. Their interest earnings will be subject to alternative minimum tax. Series B will be tax exempt, and Series C we're considering to issue some green bonds pending on the consulting to obtain independent certification to issue these series as green bonds due to the projects originally financed being environmentally focused. So on the last slide, slide number 7, the transaction summary, we talk about if we take no action, the total debt service payment for the proposed refunding bonds will be $276,433,525 until maturity in 2031. However, if we proceed with the transaction, the total debt service will be reduced to $226.1 million. So the nominal savings over the life of these bonds, the next 12 years, will be $50.2 million. That concludes this item. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Questions from the commissioners? Hearing none, may I please have a Mr. Moreno.
I just had one simple question. Could you name what those projects were that made them green bonds?
Okay, so now we have actually highlighted some of the projects that we will be working with the consultants, Sustainalytics, that they have to vet projects, and sometimes we have to go back to the engineers so they can actually evaluate and assess the nature of these projects. So the ones that we're talking about, one was electric truck program, was alternative maritime power. Any project that reduces emission could be a candidate. Then we also have Port Police Headquarters. That's a LEED building because it was renewable material use. Those are the major projects, and also installation of solar panels.
My compliments to the team. This is truly remarkable. So we are lowering our overall interest costs by $4.5 million a year, which is something like 7% of our interest costs, which is remarkable. We are borrowing for a long period of time at something like 1.87% in a world in which we have record tariffs. And so this is because of the great work the team has done, both in operations as well as in managing the rating agencies and the investment community. So this is the kind of thing that is remarkable, that nobody notices. So I noticed, and thank you. It's wonderful.
Thank you, Commissioner Renwick. Any further comments? Hearing none, may I please have a motion specifically on agenda item 13?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That motion carries. Thank you. Commissioner Renwick is recused on item number 14. We'll wait till he exits the room. May I please have a motion to approve agenda item 14?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That motion carries as well. Thank you. There being no further business, I am pleased to adjourn this meeting at 12:53 p.m. Thank you all.